Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Ruth Farrar from Bath University, and I'm also founder of the Immersive Audio Network, which is based here in the west of England. I'm delighted to be hosting our panel discussion today on the future of immersive music. While we may not have packed our crystal balls or set our time machines precisely to the future, the people on our panel here today are extremely well positioned to share insights on the upcoming future direction of immersive music, and will also be sharing insights with you on our new immersive music project called Flow. I'm joined today by a fantastic panel. We have Hans-Martin Buff. Welcome. Buff is an engineer and mixer who's worked with many greats. He was Prince's in-house engineer at Paisley Park. Buff is also one of the world's best immersive sound specialists, but please just don't take my word for it, as Buff's Dolby Atmos inside mix of Peter Gabriel's latest album was recently Grammy nominated for Best Immersive Audio Album.
Yes, thank you.
Which is very well deserving and exciting, so best of luck in February, Buff.
Thank you.
And we're also joined by Adrian Utley, who's a musician, producer, and member of the band Portishead. Adrian scored films such as Arcadia and shows such as Spiders from Mars with David Attenborough.
You got it from Wikipedia.
Yeah, on us.
It's out of date.
I've done my research. He's performed live with a mountain of amazing musicians, including Aphex Twin, Massive Attack, and Tom York. And he's also just flown back from a gig, I believe, in Milan as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're also joined by Andrew Scheps, who's collaborated with Waves on several plugins and has developed custom software with controlling Pro Tools. Andrew's engineering and mixing mastery has earned him multiple Grammy Awards for his work with Adele, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Ziggy Marley. He's worked with so many legendary musicians such as Johnny Cash and globally renowned bands including Green Day, U2, and Metallica. However, all of these incredible achievements pale in comparison to the pinnacle of Andrew's career to date, which was hosting the ADC quiz last night.
Thank you very much.
A true triumph, I believe, of a quiz.
You ask.
And we're also joined by Theo Kozlowski, a research technician in the psychology department of University of Bath. He's working with us on our immersive music project called Flow. And Theo also has a background in music from running a record shop in Peckham, London. He's helped master vinyl records, and he's DJed all around the world, including the UK, Portugal, and Japan. So a very warm welcome to you all. So to set the scene, Buff, can you share with us, what do you think are the current challenges in immersive music? Where do we begin?
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
Forgive me, my voice is a bit short, but I'll try to be understood. I think the biggest problem or challenge right now is that immersive music, 3D music, is just seen as kind of a funky companion piece to stereo. So people do what they always do. They make a stereo production, make a sound, and then they just give it to some guy with a lot of speakers, and then it's being mixed into something else, and then it's being streamed, and people choose one or the other. And I believe, just as in stereo, that the format will only be valid if music is actually made for it, not as a that's nice too type of music, but this is the music it should be. And that's kind of what I'm trying to achieve with the wonderful people I get to work with, to just open minds and make immersive music enjoyable and doable.
Great. And that's, I guess, where our Flow project comes in as well. So we're going to talk today in this panel. So Flow is a My World's Innovate UK-funded collaborative research and development project, and it brings together Peter Gabriel's real-world studios and Bath University leading an academic team to research immersive music production workflows. And during this Flow project, we're trialling new immersive audio workflows to overcome, as Buff was saying, current industry challenges, one of which is how to move from stereo to immersive formats. This research is very much timely because it tunes into audiences' increasing appetite for immersive music. So as we all know, Apple has rolled out Atmos as an immersive audio playback method. Google is working on an open format for Atmos. And also the number of immersive music venues is rapidly increasing, such as Sphere in Las Vegas and Dareshack here in Bristol. And it's very much prompting demand for content specifically for immersive audio experiences. And central to our Flow project is our creator in residence, Adrian Utley. And Adrian is creating novel immersive audio compositions during our project. And these captivating compositions will be shared with public audiences and industry experts in 3 listening tests, culminating in a final production performance in the summer of 2025. We've just had our first listening test a couple of weeks ago in Real World Studios, which was a lot of fun. Our next listening test is at Watershed Cinema in February. So if anyone would like to be part of that listening test, please come speak to me afterwards. And the reason why we chose Watershed Cinema as our venue for our next listening test is we're really interested and curious like how to create a scalable immersive music experience for venues such as cinemas that have already, invested in immersive audio playback systems. And in a way that sort of echoes what kind of Emma Fitzmaurice's fantastic session this morning on spatial audio, thinking about how can we better support people who already have access to systems, whether it's headphones or in our case, as cinemas with this immersive audio playback. To date, as Buff was alluding to at the start, a lot of immersive audio music is often like repurposed stereo content. Engineers who have absolutely no connection to the original track are having to make arbitrary artistic decisions that bear no relation to the track's original intent. And this often leads to retrofitted immersive music tracks that feel, disconnected or distorted on playback. So instead, what we're trying to boldly do with Flow and composition is intentionally design it to be immersive right from the outset. So approaching this creative process, knowing that it's immersive from the outset, Adrian, how have you found the experience of moving from stereo to this sort of new way of creating immersively?
Like Buff said, how long have we got to talk about it? It's been a massive sort of learning thing for me. I think like lots of musicians and contemporaries of mine, very skeptical about the whole thing, because often our record companies will say, can you release your virtually mono record in Atmos? No, why would we do that? And that's been my first sort of stance, no, that's definitely not a thing. Maybe a live record, I think that would work, because when you mix a live record in stereo, you kind of want it to be bigger than it actually is in stereo, and it's people that can mix well, can do that. But it still isn't that totally immersive thing that it was when you were playing the gig, Like, for instance, with Portishead, we played in New York, we played in the Round, which is, with audience around us mostly. And I've never felt that experience from our records, and, and I would love to have that. That would work for me. But it would have to be back to the original multi-tracks, which none of us want to go back to that and do that,
I do.
You do? Okay. We'll have a chat. But I think for me, it feels like moving forward in the world and having an opportunity now to work in that amazing studio, Real World, and with Buff on this, it's a huge learning curve. And I think it's really relevant. I think it's really, if the music is composed for that situation, then I think it can really work on many, many levels. I think there's a lot to be discovered. Like, for instance, we recorded a bass drum with many mics. How many mics? Lots.
13.
And that makes you feel like you're really not in the drum, but kind of really involved with it. I mean, I love a bass drum coming out of one speaker. It's cool. But this was like, oh yeah, this does actually sound really cool. And so on you move, you could record an orchestra like that. I'm sure you've all done that. But for me, that was exciting, to feel the size of this thing and not have things like a dog barking behind me or something, the thing you get in cinema, which is sometimes really irritating. because you're sitting in the wrong place and all you can hear is the dog barking in the back speaker. It's also, I mean, I'm learning a lot about it, and we talked about it endlessly, and I think there's a lot to go. I think it's really cool. The other thing about, actually, you were saying about engineers getting hold of tracks, and I listened to a Fleetwood Mac track, The Chain, I think it was, and I realised actually all the instruments that were in there that I hadn't realised before. So it kind of deconstructs a mix. And what we're trying to do with stereo mixes is glue it all together, and that unglues it. So I've never been really a big fan of that. Abbey Road, I heard some of that, and that was slightly unglued. Took away the magic for me, anyway.
Yeah.
So I think moving forward, in my opinion.
You said as well that it's, a very sort of steep learning curve as well, because we're so conditioned to think in stereo. So I was wondering, Buff and Andrew, when you start working with musicians who are new to immersive and they're making that leap from stereo to immersive, how do you best support musicians in the studio?
I mean, I'm sure Andrew agree. If you're a recording engineer, your duty is to be ready for whatever's happening and not be in the way. I guess that's the main service thing, vibe thing you can provide to a session beyond your handling of stuff and making it sound good. So I think that's the same when you do immersive. I think the biggest impediment of the workflow as compared to stereo, I mean, in the beginning, I think there's a bit of intimidation because you just have to put up a ton of mics. And I think that's the one thing you really have to change in your attitude when you record immersive rather than stereo. There'll be a lot of fucking tracks. Where I had like in a regular pop rock track, like 60, 70 tracks in a full production, now it's like 400. But I don't have to use them all, but I need to record them so I can decide in the end if I want to use them or not. So that's a bit intimidating, but I don't think that impedes the process. What does impede the process is stuff like, what I call the office work. I think Dave Gilmour once said that, the thing with doing solos is you do the solo for 10 minutes and then you spend 4 hours trying to double it because you try to figure out what you just did. So since you have more space, you don't just have to double, you have to quadruple. And that's a bit painful. But other than that, I think that's really the approach. Be ready for what can come, offer sounds that, you haven't heard before. Maybe I can say this, but I think the most interesting thing that's come, everything's cool, but the most interesting thing that's come out of our playing around in the immersive thing is to set up Adrian with his usual guitar sound setup and feed it into kind of a multiplying setup I did, so he could play into it, but he'd have sound from everywhere without having to, without being gimmicky, but it just was bigger. And he improvised for about, I'd release it tomorrow. It'd be a beautiful ambient record. It wasn't planned, it wasn't over intellectualized, it was just reacting to immersive sound and making something that he probably wouldn't have done had it been only stereo.
No, absolutely right.
So there.
Yeah. Wonderful. What about you, Andrew?
I have so much to say.
Yeah.
In terms of supporting people who are getting into production of their own music in immersive, I think there is some hand-holding that needs to happen. I think there's introduction to, it's the idea of arrangement. You talk about quadrupling things or whatever, and talking about listening to I don't know who did the Fleetwood Mac Atmos mixes, but I mean, even in the 5.1 days, there are a lot of great records that just got destroyed because it used to be drums with a little bit of percussion in front that was this motor. And now you've got drums here and percussion here. So the drums aren't as good, and you got this really annoying shaker behind you. So it's almost, I feel like I'm repeating myself because I said this so much. It is so much easier to ruin a song during the mix by splitting up elements that shouldn't be split up.
Yeah.
And that happens because the elements were created to be listened to on 2 speakers. But at the same time, I think that with a musical mixer, you can make a stereo production 100 times more compelling in an immersive listening environment. Now, in terms of making the records, I think it's very difficult to tell a rock band, by the way, we're going to track, and the place where you're going to listen while you're tracking is going to have 15 speakers and it's going to be very expensive, but don't worry, it'll be worth it. Where instead, I've worked with a few bands where I've said, look, just get an extra pair of speakers and work in quad. All you need to do is be thinking about the front wall is the song and maybe there's stuff behind you, but you know your guitar arrangement works for more than 2 speakers. The number of background vocals works. But at the same time, I think in record production at the moment, it still does have to fold down to stereo in some sort of meaningful way. So it can be, I mean, Buff's, the way you approach it to have a completely separate mix is fantastic. And if you have not heard his mix of the Peter Gabriel record, listen to it. It's incredible. And it is not a version of the 2 stereo versions of the record that were made by different people. So it is a different way to consume the same music. But as far as I know, there weren't, other than you reamping and things like that and a little bit of additional recording, it was the source material was the same in general?
Yeah, we all 3 of us got the same Pro Tools session, in a rough mix state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that there are a lot of production ideas and methods that will evolve the more it is, because the anecdotal part of this is that the band makes a record, it's in stereo, it's finished, they love it. The label says we need immersive mixes because Apple's paying more for streaming the Atmos, and you can't be featured on playlists that are Atmos unless you have an Atmos mix. So we need this. The band's not happy about it. There's very little money. When it's done well and the band can check it out on speakers, they lose their minds. It's the best thing they've ever heard because it is the intent, but it is enveloping. And your study is, I think, showing how enveloping it is and how much more emotionally people will connect with it. So the learning curve is going to be as much about writing the music and arranging as it is about any of the technical stuff we do. And then there's the extra microphone thing.
Which nobody has to care about. Once again, I
Yeah.
think that's just a must in engineering, that the capturing of the intent can't be in the way of art ever.
No.
So
And-
you're the bottle that catches the lightning. You're not in the way. You're not the roof to fend it off, and that's really, really, really important. And I hope
And
I
I
was
think
too much in your way there.
No,
But
the
you
holy
weren't.
grail is to be producing for the format, whatever the format is. I mean, it'll be format agnostic, but producing for immersive is amazing. But I still feel like in the right hands, you can make unbelievably compelling work out of stereo productions. I do think it's possible and it's amazing.
We're on the wrong panel. We're talking about immersive music, not
I
stereo.
know. Well,
Joking.
immersive listening to
Yeah,
other music.
I agree.
But it turned, what's surprising to me is how well arrangements that were built for stereo feel like they were built for immersive when you get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means most things stay in the front. And that would happen even if you're producing for it. But sometimes you can absolutely wrap it around people, and then the experience is amazing. And then again, that will lead people towards producing specifically for that.
I mean, if I may
Sorry.
say
No,
something
it's a
quick,
good point.
it's just like arrangement to me, at least, is more or less. If you think about the art of guiding attention, of guiding musical attention. You're going on a journey, and you're putting up these markers. Now this is what's happening, and Andrew was saying this. So during the Peter Gabriel mix. I mean, it wasn't put up that way, but there were moments where I felt like the musical intent of the arrangement couldn't be conveyed in more than stereo, because I didn't have the material. It wasn't full enough in a way, So I took heart and I asked, "Can I record some more?" So they said yes, and Peter liked it, and I guess where I'm going with this is, you can have both. I totally agree with you. But if you can augment a little bit the intent that's already there, you're home free. And I'm totally with Adrian that I'm a Beatles fan. And when I bought the mono box, I heard every change because it's so it's my mother's milk. So somebody like adding extra stuff to Beatles stuff to make it Atmos is not going to happen, because whoever is trying to do that is going to be lynched. So what's the point of doing it in the first place? Is with something that's at the most 8 tracks. So anyway, there you go.
But when you talked about, capturing lightning in a bottle in a session, can you share an example of, how you approach recording immersive music? Or Andrew, if you've have an example as well.
I mean, I think we'll have the same example. We'll just put up, like for example, you go into a room that has a nice room sound and you just have a proper array up that doesn't just capture stereo, but captures the immersive world. And there's just an amazing guy named Hyunkuk Lee, who's at Huddersfield University. He's like the king of arrays. So if you guys are interested, it's just, I mean, he's very, very open with his knowledge and shares.
That's all
with anybody
published.
else. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Or I just plaster the room with mics. There's a couple of techniques I like to use. I'll just have them up. I mean, the example that Adrian used with the kick. Just so you know, I didn't put like whatever I said, 8, 9, 10, 12 mics. I think it was on a kick. To record a kit. This wasn't like a funk groove. This was like a huge.
It's a
kick,
28-inch
yeah,
bass drum.
20, somebody going, boom. So just capturing that as kind of a sample, that's what I did. But I had the mics up, that's my point. It was there, they were set up, they were ready to go. My mantra is, if I don't record it, I can't throw it away. So I need to have the mics up and record them, and if they end up in a Pro Tools folder, that stays inactivated, and it's never used ever again, so be it. But if I need it and I don't have it, I'm in trouble. So that's kind of how I prepare for it. That's the one thing. And the other thing is thinking of ways of using established instrumental approaches and give them like an immersive shine.
That was a point that I was thinking about just then, because you talk about mic arrays and stuff, and you had a lot of them, and it's really fantastic stuff. But I still love a 57 on a 57 on a Vox AC30 stuffed right in it.
Yeah.
And that, we managed to do that as well.
Yeah.
So some of the techniques that we all use for recording that we've done for years, the various microphones or things, are still possible in that world, I think.
Totally. It's not a cut. I think it's a step forward. It's another step. I mean, if you listen to Pink Floyd Money versus A Day in the Life by the Beatles, A Day in the Life by the Beatles doesn't use stereo as a creative thing. It's all mono stuff. The orchestra's mono. Everything's mono. It just happens to be panned somewhere for the couple of geeks that had stereo. Whereas then you go to Pink Floyd, same studio, same approach, with the exception of actually creatively using stereo for the arrangement, the movement, the recording of the room.
And quad, too.
Yeah, well, even on
That
top of
was
that.
originally conceptualized for quads, so a lot of the arrangements
so
that way.
the more than mono is part of the creative process, but there's still, the content is, the tools are still from, whatever. You can use whatever.
Do you not then reference, say, something, if you're recording in PCMA 3D, for example, would you still use a Decatree or a mono as a reference point to understand why you've used that, why you're using that PCMA 3D or whatever it may be?
In my world, in the non-classical world, Decatrees don't really happen that much. But I can give you an example. So Peter Gabriel's album wasn't like mixed in one crazy run, but like in installments of 4 or so. So when we got started, and Peter kind of got into the process, he invited me along to the recordings that were still happening. So all the orchestra stuff was recorded at British Grove, Mark Knopfler's place. And it was the usual setup that they do, like the spot mics and a Decatree and like 2 stereo outliers, blah, 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 blah. And then I put a small ESMA in the middle with just 8 mics. And oddly enough, that thing by itself, in some spots, just represents the entire thing. But when it got really big, I still used the Decatree and all that. And you don't have to do it that way, but I did. Where, my setup was kind of like where the conductor would be, and the orchestra would be wrapped around me like that, or around the listener, with the conductor facing towards the back, meaning like, as a listener, the orchestra is wrapped around you and behind you. So I used all the Decatree stuff where it actually was, meaning in the front, further up. So I could just use all these little bits and use them and see like, listen how it would sound in the end. And it was just an amazing set of beautiful sounds I was given.
And I recently recorded a string quartet in a church in Paris as an overdub. It's not a string quartet piece for a low roar record. And the beginning of the arrangement is all harmonics. It's very sort of scratchy, but very high and very, very delicate. And I found that even for the stereo mix, I'm only using the height microphones for that particular part of the arrangement. And it's this amazing ethereal sound because you're basically recording the ceiling of the church. And then when they come down into their normal octave and are full bow, it is extraordinary when you turn on the other microphones. So the immersive recording techniques actually translate back into stereo in some cases, but then for the immersive mix of that song, I'm not even going to change that. Like, there's no reason the quartet needs to be in the front during that part of the song. So the recording in that case dictated the use of the thing that I recorded.
It's brilliant. Yeah, fascinating, all of it. I had the decisions it shapes. And I guess going from recording immersive music to measuring immersive music, Theo, using Flow, our project, as a case study, can you kind of briefly share with us your methods and some insights you kind of gathered so far about using biometric data to measure participants' responses to immersive music when they're listening over speakers in a group setting?
Sure. Bear with me as I've got quite a few notes.
Yeah, go for it. We're ready.
And I must underline that this is all tentative findings, yet to be properly validated or peer-reviewed, but we have some findings. So we used a variety of pre-existing validated questionnaires, both pre and post auditioning of the piece. However, we generally find that these kind of self-report measures are not necessarily always reliable. I'd like to give moment by moment kind of feedback on how the
Your mic went off, I think.
mic off.
Yeah, I think it.
Could somebody just give him that mic?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It went red.
it's got red. It's not red.
There you go.
I'll do it with this instead. Yeah, so I don't know what you call that, but yeah, so existing questionnaires, pre and post, to sort of capture people's intent, how they feel when they walked in the room, etc. And then we sort of correlated that with some biometric kind of feedback. So we strapped everyone up with ECG, so we could measure their heart rates throughout the piece. We also recorded EEG, so brain signals throughout the experience. And I must say, we haven't had a chance yet to get around to analysing the brain signals yet, as the files are humongous and wildly too big. But there is some interesting correlation between some of the measures of self-report and that of the heart rate data. For example, a self-report musicality, the Goldsmith's musical sophistication index, is correlated quite positively with heart rate synchrony, which alludes to the idea that the more musical a person is, the more in sync they are with the rest of the audience. So the questions that we typically ask within that would be like the number of years they've spent training, daily practice, how many instruments they play, number of concerts they've attended, etc. There's also another questionnaire where we were asking for self-reported measures of personality, and one of those being openness. Now, this is a hotly contested sort of personality type of questionnaire. However, it is often used, and openness does often correlate with these kind of experiences, as you can see in other people's papers, like Paul Zach, for example, has written quite a lot about this kind of type of thing. And this was significant as well, considerably so. Those that saw themselves as being open, were considerably more in sync with the rest of the audience. I'd like to see some correlation with EEG. I guess we'll find out when we get through the data. There is rather a lot of it, but there is other papers written, at least in the last couple of years, with interbrain correlation, interbrain synchrony. Like, for example, correlating with those that are the closer you are, physical closeness, perhaps correlates with interbrain synchrony. As does emotional closeness and group emotional state. So, yeah, I kind of hope we get to kind of validate that, or at least see some of that. Or if we don't see it in this data set, then perhaps in subsequent studies that we're looking to do, we will. But yeah, the emotion in the brain, I think, is the next step. Yeah, I can't wait to take it a bit further.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and we will be publishing all of these findings once we've done all 3 listening tests. This is just the first sort of taster insights from our first one. Thank you so much, Theo. And I guess thinking about mixing immersive music as well, understanding the sea change from channel-based to object-based audio with immersive music. Andrew and Buff, I wonder if you could share insights on how this has impacted your approach to mixing, and have you got any useful techniques to share with us when mixing immersive music?
Well, I mean, it was mentioned in the earlier talk about just sort of a primer on immersive music, is that there is no more mix bus, which for mixers is a thing. It's a place where all the audio ends up and now you can process it. And that doesn't really exist because the audio isn't put together until you play it back. And it only gets put together if it happens to be coming out of the same speakers, but depending on how many speakers you have, that can change. And so it's a very different way to think about the mixing. And so for me, I do a little bit more processing individually than I would normally do, or than I used to do, because all of this has come right back into my stereo mixing. So I don't mix differently. And I'm often, when I'm mixing in stereo, think, oh, I wish I could do the thing that I would do if this were an immersive mix. So there's a lot, I think, in the techniques, but also in the way we think about mixing. There's so many amazing things you can do in an immersive setting that you cannot do in stereo, that you start to wish you could do them when you're mixing in stereo. But from a technical side, I think the biggest thing was the mix bus, wishing we could do some of the mix bus things we can do on all the individual channels. And then I think for me, realizing that actually I don't care about that as much anymore.
Moved on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really interesting because, well, first of all, that question, do we have a bus or not, may just go away within the next month, but
Yeah.
Stay tuned, developers. You know, this, I think, I don't know if I get the timeline right, but like, I think the approach to mixing where you push something through a bus and add dynamics as you go by adding buses, which I do as well, is a fairly recent development if you look at it. I mean, probably starting with the board compression on SSL and then just kind of splitting up and doing more rounds. And oddly enough now, kind of going back to the original, like you said, kind of more balance-based approach to mixing rather than making everybody sonically get along and making it bigger. So that is fun. I mean, I didn't waste a single thought on stereo because there were already 2 stereo mixes with Peter's album. And some guys listened to my mix in stereo, which is probably crap. But they preferred it because they felt it was more musical in that sense, that it wasn't like such a, I don't know,
Well, we're
compressed, for
technically,
lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Single impression, but like more of a musical journey.
And also the levels we have to deliver. I mean, there's so many practical considerations in terms of just the pipeline that inform things. I mean, we have to deliver Atmos music mixes at -18 LUFS. I will fight people out in the hallway if you like LUFS later on. But, I mean, I haven't done a stereo mix at -18, maybe ever.
I've never looked at LUFS in a stereo mix.
Yeah, I've only started since then, and well, actually no, because I won the loudness award back then. It's a very different thing, but yeah, to have that amount of headroom, both in terms of like actual headroom because of level, but headroom in terms of speakers, you can separate things so that they become more important. You're doing less kind of carving EQ so that you can hear separate things, and more musical EQ and musical panning. And there's so much more that you can do because you have different places you can do things.
Which is also a danger, I might add. I mean, I remember the first 5.1 mix I did. I just took everything and pushed it places because I could. So I didn't clean up. And then when it folded down the stereo, that is by far the worst stereo mix I've ever done in my life. Because it was just, you know, there was none of the like, you all just get along type approaches that you have to have in mixing, where you go like, these sounds need to be on the same planet, need to work with each other. I totally ignored that. I just,
Yeah.
and it was a shit mix 5.1 as well. But I'm just telling you, I feel like that is something, if I would have started with Atmos, I think that would have made it much harder for me to learn the craft, because it wouldn't have forced me to make these types of decisions that I have to make every day in a stereo mix.
And Adrian was talking about, the learning curve of composing for it, but the mixing as well. I mean, there was a song I was mixing from the 1975, one of the much more experimental things, and it's very long. And it's like, great, this is a place where I can be spinning stuff around. And it was exhausting. And I had to actually create sort of a vocabulary in my head of, I've got the front wall. That's where people will feel comfortable. They won't have things behind them. And I need to now arrange the spatialness of this mix so that every so often everything collapses back to the front and people can get into the music, and then you start introducing the stuff, and then it builds up and it goes nuts. And you'd never, ever think about that if you're not mixing in an immersive format. And it's sort of incredible. It doesn't then inform your stereo mixes. It has nothing to do with anything except the immersive experience of listening to the song.
It's using immersion as like a narrative almost.
Yeah. And also realizing how you can absolutely wear out the listener by doing everything you can do.
Yeah.
It's a gimmick.
And really being
Make it
appropriate with it and using it as another character in the mix.
You just use the word narrative. I mean, that's what an arrangement is.
Yeah, it is.
It's nothing else.
I think with 3D cinema as well, very earlier, it was gimmicky and exhausting. But actually, we now, with vendors and people working in 3D, you actually understand exactly what can happen about it and how massively enhancing it is. And I think that immersive mixers should be like that, really. That I was interested in, we've talked about it, is the reptile brain, the stuff from behind you. And then not in a sort of tricksy way, but actually, we haven't gone into that, but it is quite interesting if you make, that there is an emotional human response to stuff behind you that we don't get with stereo, really. I haven't used it, but it's a thing.
Well, I think there's something, and I'm making this up, so it could be totally wrong, but when you're listening to music coming at you just from the front, something we're very used to, we don't think about it, but your brain is still thinking like, well, is someone walking in the door? What's going on behind me? Whereas when the music is wrapping around you, you do not listen for other things. So you know that anything you're expecting to hear, because your brain's just predicting this stuff, will actually be a relevant part of the music that you're listening to. And outside stimuli don't make as big of an impact. I think your threshold for noticing little things goes way up because you're so immersed. I mean, immersive is a really great term for it because I think emotionally you're as immersed as you are just sonically.
Well, interestingly, what we've observed both in our first listening test for Flow and also immersive audio network listening events where we have a big ambisonic setup is people just naturally close their eyes and to create that even deeper level of immersion. So they take away the visual stimulus just so they can really focus on that immersive sound without us even asking them to do it. It just naturally happens even when in a group setting. So that'll be part of our research as well, I think, Theo.
Oh, for sure. I think there is definitely one of the elements of self-report was that someone lost the ability to cognitively think beyond outside of the music because they were so immersed. They were stuck in it and they were trying to think about things in their everyday life of, what's going on? I've got this later to do, but they couldn't. And they were so stuck in the music that they lost that ability to think cognitively in that regard. Due to the nature of the presentation format, which, I think you're right. It's like you're in the music.
If you just count the number of times people get goosebumps, it goes up. I do when mixing. If I can give myself goosebumps in a stereo mix, that's amazing. And it happens way more often in an immersive mix, where you actually want to hear your own mix, which I'm sure you're like me. You don't ever want to hear anything you've ever done.
No, There's a big wall of things I've made that is full of dust and pride. One thing I'd like to add to this real quick, because it kind of goes back to what is the problem with immersive music today. What you guys said is totally right, but it both kind of refers to a very special listening moment. meaning somebody just like at the presentation goes to the place to listen to it, sits down, and then closes their eyes. My personal ambition is to make this music available, and the technology is coming and is there with headphones in a way, at least, for everyday things where you don't close your eyes. So are people going to enjoy it as they do the dishes or jog or are on the bus or whatever it is, wherever it is you listen to music, you know? Because I do believe there is no problem in acceptance when it comes to specific events. So when you go to some exhibit and you're in the Stone Age exhibit and you're surrounded by and dinosaurs roaring or whatever it may be, everybody goes, "Wow, that's really cool." But there is a disconnect to like the proper music in a way. So I hope that whatever it is we're going to do, people are going to, you know, at some point pop on their streaming service or whatever it is and listen to it and go like, "Wow, this is just great
we got to
music."
talk about the dinosaurs in the Stone Age.
Yeah. Well,
Later.
That'll be next year.
I was,
On a quiz.
I was
Yeah.
just prepping you. I was just giving you ideas for your next quiz next year. That's all.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'd like to kind of conclude on a big question and this is to all of you, is what do you think is the future for immersive music? Because I know, Buff, you've already, I guess, part answered it.
Well, my wish for it is that it'll just be a creative, amazing tool for artists. Meaning, it won't be well, do you like the stereo version or the immersive version? But people just make 10 songs. 8 of them are big and they're in immersive. 1 is in stereo, 1's in mono. It's just a way of creating your stuff. It's not, you know, an alternative version of presentation, but it's actually something where you can create, and that is something. It's a stage for your artistic desires. That's my wish, at least.
Do you think immersive music lends itself to some genres over others? Because some go
Yes.
into quite a meditative state, don't they,
Yes.
when they sing immersively?
I mean, you know, Peter Gabriel clearly is. I mean, on that album, there are a couple of really good examples what can do. There's a song called Road to Joy, which is just everything. It's like a carnival ride. Sounds everywhere, chip, 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 chip. Then there are songs like Love Can Heal, which is cocoons, which is probably the most impressive of them all. Then there are really open ones, just a piano where I could add, you know, more mics, and it's just you're in it, you're in the room. So these types of things lend themselves to it. I also, the first Atmos thing I did, not immersive, but Atmos thing, was a band I produced in Germany called the Scorpions. And they're just bread and butter hard rock band. They're really good at what they do, but that's what they do. And so I did an Atmos version. I would say about a third was better and bigger than the stereo. A third was as good / better, you know, up for grabs. And a third wasn't worse. I mean, so a third of it, I don't think, it was just, you know, would have been a great mono thing. Even stereo is a bit much for that. So yes, I mean, if it's just punchy stuff with 4 guys, maybe not so much.
I think for me, as a composer and musician, sometimes stereo and producer of music and low-level mixing, stereo is sometimes not quite enough for what you want. Like redoing some live things, like I mentioned earlier on. So I'm really pleased that is an aspect. I'm also, and the compositional aspect of it, I think is really interesting. And I'm definitely, since doing this project, I've been approached by quite a lot of people for various different things in immersive situations. I'm really interested in changing how live music is performed as well. Because we tend to be on a stage with a massive load of speakers, like stereo. And I mean, obviously at festivals and things and for very big gigs that we were talking about earlier on, that kind of has to be how it is. But I think that could change. But I'm really interested in concerts with systems around that and audience around, like we did in New York. This whole thing of us up there, you down here, doesn't always work for me, you know. I mean, I think if you go and see the Scorpions, then that's what you want.
Yeah.
or
Right.
you know, whatever it would be. But I'm really interested and have been approached to do some of these things in various places in England, and I'm really excited by the idea of it, that you can place people where they actually are and really feel immersed in the music, and actually playing it live, you will be responding to what is happening around you. And to me, that is exciting also, as well as recording in that world and composing in that world.
Yeah, definitely. Because you're so used to a certain point of view at a gig, so to really play with that point of audition sounds brilliant. Andrew?
Well, I mean, I think the near future is what you alluded to already. It's about getting it into people's homes, and the consumer delivery part of it is very, very difficult right now. But it's getting better, and I think it's taken a couple more years than I thought it would, but the consumer electronics companies are understanding that they need to deliver something that isn't 15 speakers in a box and a diagram of how you're supposed to set them up. It's Bluetooth speakers that know where they are in a room and will self-align with your sound bar, and then if you add a sub. So it really takes this idea of client-side rendering to where it's supposed to go, and then we can be creating without worrying too much. Because I think, I mean, even I don't spend a huge amount of time on it, but I do have to sort of think about what's the worst case now? And also, like, using height speakers. If you're streaming, Apple Music, for instance, we won't go into the technical details, but you've got this 768K stream. That's the full bandwidth for a 704 mix. 128K is for the top, for a quad, or 702, I guess. But that's zero bandwidth for the top. If you just go encode 128K MP3 of your favorite song, and you'll hate it. It sounds terrible. So we still have limitations as people creating the music that we have to take into account to some extent. Whereas in stereo, we no longer have any limitations to think about. So I'm hoping that in the near-ish future, those will go away and the creatives can just do what they want to do without having to think about it. That's a wish, not a fact.
Where can we hear this stuff now? You know,
Come over to my place.
is that
No, I mean, there are people who do playback parties. You can easily set something up with a Sonos sound bar and a couple of speakers behind you, and that will be enough. Or Sennheiser's got stuff with beamforming and upward firing tweeters. So you can get a sense of it. But even if you listen on your iPhone, if you have your iPhone vertical, it's mono, turn it this way, it is actually Atmos enabled.
Same
It's
with the Mac,
spatial.
like that. Same with
And
the
it's crazy when you're holding it like this, how
What?
wide it sounds. So there are ways to at least appreciate the more than, I think what it is you're hiding the speakers. That's what the point is. It doesn't sound like it's coming from the thing that's that big that's in front of you. It sounds like it's coming from here. And it's trickery in a way, but that is what immersive music is you're not knowing exactly where it's all coming from because it doesn't matter. It's coming from some version of everywhere.
I hear that it's going to be in cars as well.
Yeah,
Which is
it already is. I mean, and then, do we have time to go into this just really
Yeah,
briefly?
yeah.
So you've got the issue of multiple listening positions, which MPEG-H does take care of.
Right.
You're also into licensing fees if you're talking about Atmos, so that's a real consideration for anything that's very low profit margin. Apparently, cars are very low profit margin. Who knew? But to pay $15 to license an audio decoding means that the armrest goes away, sort of thing. So there are a lot of really practical considerations to do that. But cars are, an obvious place.
Yeah, because
you
it's a
know where
great
you're
place to-
sitting.
yeah.
You've got speakers. You know exactly where they are. So there are a lot of places that consumers will be where they can experience it. So we just need more and more and more of them that are easy to set up.
Well, headphones haven't been mentioned, but there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, better binaural rendering, that sort of thing will definitely help. But some people just don't externalize. I don't externalize ever.
Really.
Yeah, ever.
Okay.
It's such a drag.
But I feel like the streamers are really picking up on that note of headphones, because am I right in thinking that Apple is incentivizing musicians with immersive mixes? They're paying them more than stereo?
Yeah, per
Yeah,
stream,
so-
it is. It is. But then you've got this choice between people who are basing the binaural encoding on HRTF or on head tracking. It seems to be these just two worlds instead of some combination And there are other things besides those two that help people externalize, because it's all about externalizing. Even if you're talking about a sound bar in front of you, you want to feel like things are coming from behind and above and all the rest of it. So to do that without physically having speakers there is the holy grail. And I mean, it keeps getting better. Every update of iOS is better. And
I think the main point is if the music will be there and people want to hear it, the technology will follow. Right now, it's a bit on its head.
yeah,
There is some technology, it's kind of where, but there's just nothing to listen to, you know? So you need to make music for it that isn't just rumors for
Yeah.
the fifth time, but it's like, it's actually a new thing. And as soon as that happens, as soon as the listeners demand it, the rest will follow.
it's
So
also a
let's make music.
format which people are used to hearing bad stereo mixes. You know, nobody minds. They listen through it and they hear the record. At the moment, a bad immersive mix, like, oh, immersive sucks. It's the format. It's not the music. It's not the mix that was the problem. And there are a lot of bad immersive mixes out there because
That's
it's
not- yeah.
so easy to ruin
Yeah.
things. So, and it's just lack of experience or whatever it is. But there are a lot of things to overcome. But to me, it's about the consumption, because I think the artists love it when they hear it.
Yeah.
Maybe
am
it's going. Oh, sorry.
Am I right thinking that some Atmos mixes, immersive mixes of records are done with AI? Somebody
Well,
told
I don't
me
know
that.
about AI, but there are lots of up-mixing tools, and Apple's very quick to pull them down. If you put in if you submit a mix that has been done with an up-mixing tool, it gets
Gets gone.
gets gone,
Okay.
which is a problem in some situations. But it's more that it's done. I'll just be very, very quick. There are people who will do a 12-song record for $500, not per song, for a 12-song record.
Yeah, yeah.
These are not necessarily people who are going to be musical and good at mixing.
It feels like we're going back. I know we're so mindful of time, but it feels like we're going back to our original point of like creating music intentionally from the beginning that is immersive. And I wonder if that's where we're going to draw a line at this here. But if anyone would like to continue the conversation on Discord, please do. And we'll be sticking around afterwards as well. So thank you so much to our panel on the future of immersive music. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Pause